Hi everyone, welcome to the Class Data Feeds webinar. A little bit about myself. I've been working with Class for over 3 years now. Prior to joining Class, I worked in the SMSF industry for over 7 years as an SMSF administrator / accountant. Before we get started, some information around the webinar. A recorded version will be available on the Class website. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar and I will endeavor to answer the frequently asked. Having said that, a copy of all the questions and answers will be available after the webinar. There would be a survey for you to provide feedback and we would love to hear back from you. I also have a couple of poll questions which I would like to ask for a better understanding of the requirements. You will now see a pop-up on the screen with the first question. And I'll leave it on for 20 to 30 seconds and I'll quickly talk about what these options are. What do you find most difficult about setting up feeds? First option, identifying the product. It's purely asking you when you are on the feeds console, is it easy or hard to identify a product? Entering account details, where do you find those details? Is it easy or hard? Is that a process you find daunting when you're setting up? Authorization process, what do you need to do when you are setting up an authority for a feed, where to send it to? We have help available, but how easy or hard is it for you? Or is it all of the above? I'll leave it for another 10 seconds for you to have a think and put in your responses. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to the agenda for today. It's purely around benefits of feeds, different types of feeds at Class, authority processes, and feeds management. And most importantly, how to get help. What are the benefits of feeds? The first thing comes to mind is time saving. We are now in the world of automation and want to move away from manual processes. Having feeds set up correctly saves the administrator a lot of time. It also cuts out any human errors. You have more time to focus on areas that you don't really put much time on. You're not able to spend time on a process that you wanted to improve, training. It sort of puts you in a better position and gives you a head start in terms of processing a fund. Since the data is direct from the source and we are AS 3402 certified, it also gives the auditors a lot of confidence when they're auditing your funds. Also puts you in a good position to go back to the auditor that this data is coming directly from the source. Different types of feeds. Most importantly, what is a feed? We at Class categorize feeds in two broad categories. Feeds without an authority process that are available at a community level, like daily prices for listed securities, managed funds under an API accord. Not to forget, we also support the major 15 foreign currencies and exchange rates. The rates are available daily and are RPA rates. Where the investments are directly held, we provide income announcement on a click of a button. What does that mean? If you don't have a wrap or a provider for a specific fund, it's not a large size fund. As far as it's set up correctly, marked as directly held, which I would cover in detail later, you can get the announcement data by clicking the generate income button. The second category, which is the major one, is feeds with an authority process. Like a bank account, platforms, a wrap, and a broker account. There's always confusion around the difference between a wrap and a broker. In my words, a wrap is used by a firm to manage a portfolio for an annual fee, which is based on total assets under management. Whereas a broker is a setup charge based on commission on trading. From a feeds viewpoint, or to say from a setup in feeds, in most cases, a wrap account has a bank account linked to it, whereas a broker does not. For example, Asgard has a bank account which is linked to the Asgard wrap, and that is not available as a product outside, versus ComSec that has a bank account linked to the side and it would not feed through the ComSec feed. We'll cover that in detail later as to what these differences are and how to set them up. Different authorization types. Now, we've divided the feeds with an authority process in two major categories: account holder. An account holder feed is where trustees get a form which is generated from class based on the information you have on a fund, and they sign the form and send it back to you. Also, there is an online process which is fairly new to the whole process, and the major provider we have who signed up for this is Westpac. I want to say they're ahead of the game in terms of the processing. There's no paper forms involved. You go online, use the tips available through our user guide. It talks about what the processes are, and you move on. The trustees would go online and put in the code you provide them based on the tips provided in the user guide, and the feed starts seamlessly. An advisor feed, also known as a third-party authorization. When you have an advisor linked to a portfolio or to a product, that sort of cuts the trustees from the process. You go directly to the advisor. Of course, you would know who the advisor is. If you don't, you contact the trustees and go, I can see an advisor name on the statement. Are you happy for us to contact them? And you take the process from there. We have three different processes under the advisor process. I wouldn't go into too much detail at the moment, but I'll quickly go through what these three different processes are. An authority form is very similar to an account holder, but in this case, you're sending it to an advisor who would sign the form and send it to the provider. And online is where an advisor goes onto the online portal, enters the details, links the account, selects class as the feed source to get the data, and you get the data. An email is when an advisor sends an email to the provider saying authorize class for the data. So moving on with the setup, I'll be showing you today an account holder setup using a bank as an example, where I will talk about how to generate an authority form. When you send a form out, what you need to make sure, the timing of sending that information out. What do you do when the form is back? Do you scan a copy in the system? When do you send it out? And things like that. It's very important for you to keep the timing in mind and what steps you take when you set up an account holder authority. So we're in a fund now at the dashboard level. So I'll take you through setting up a bank feed. Click on feeds console. That's now on a fund level. You're in the feed console. There are always two options. So in this scenario, I'm using a bank account that is already set up in the fund. If in case you don't have the bank set up, you can click on new and go new cash feed. So today I'll just use the CBA bank, which is in this fund, and take you through step by step what this page means. The first half of this screen talks about the setup side of things, which is purely the account name, account number, and what the display name is going to be on the reports. And the second half talks about the authority process, what needs to be ticked, and I'll go step by step. So starting with the code, this is just a unique code for the fund, an identifier. A little tip when you set up a bank account, if you put in, so I'm jumping onto the BSB here, for the only reason when you put in the BSB and hit tab, the system automatically identifies the institution for you. It's a good indicator just in case you entering the BSB wrong, and if you have a statement handy or not. You may be aware that the fund holds a CommBank account, and let's say you entered something incorrectly, this is a good checkpoint. And while I'm here, I'll just put in the account number. Going back to the display name, this is purely for reporting purposes, and this name would appear on all your reports. It's always a good idea if you have a lot of CBA accounts across your business to use a similar name as a display name, so for consistency purposes. Account name. Now, if you have a statement handy, Normally, it would be in a format of the trustees acting trustee for the super fund. And that's always the recommended option if you don't have a statement handy. But it's always highly suggested to look at the statement or try to find one for this information. Because just in case we get this information wrong, the form would be rejected. And it's just a time-consuming process, regenerating the form, sending it back to the trustees, and then to the provider. Now, just from a feeds setup viewpoint, it's always misunderstood by a lot of clients that maybe the form goes to class and we are rejecting a form. We act as a median between you and the provider. So all we try to do is get the information from a provider, like in this case, do you send a form out by post? Do you send it online? And all those instructions are available on a user guide, which I'll show you in a minute. All we do is we do the follow-up on your behalf. When you send a form directly to a provider, it's instructions that are provided to us as to how they like them, which is why it's important to treat each feed and each product separately. Even though you're dealing with two CommBank accounts in your business, one may not have the form correct or an account number correct. So it's always fair to take the assumption that I would deal with a feed by feed cases and not by product. Moving on. I've used CommBank as an example because this is one that does not pre-populate the product for you. Why? Because CommBank may have a couple of other products for a bank account. Like CommCheck Advisor Services has a separate cash account product. So in this case, we know it's a CommBank, you select that. Likes of any other bank accounts in Macquarie, once you put in the BSB, it would automatically pick the product for you because there are not multiple products there. Now to the second half. It's important to have use automated feed ticked. Because I'm using a sample here, it was a tick, but in your case, it should be automatically ticked. Once you have that there, there's a help on this automated feed available. I'll click on that, and it takes you to this page, which talks about what I've already covered off the first half. I'll go back to this in a second, what this means and when you can use this. Back to the setup point. You generate a form. And this is where the importance of putting the information in the first half has a lot of value, because all the information entered pre-populates in the form. Then the next step is based on your process. You could either print this form straight away, or you may have a document center where you save these forms per client for your records. It's always good to have a soft copy and send one out to the client, just for consistency. Where it holds the most important, if an original form needs to be sent out, and this is where a lot of clients get confused. Do I keep a soft copy? Do I need to print this out and send it across? Is when this user guide page comes into play. I've already gone through the configuration process, but just in case if you're unsure, this is also available. Step by step, what needs to put in where. I'll go back to the authority process now. It's very important that you refer to this initially whenever you set up a feed. Why? Because the authority process, as I mentioned earlier, could be very different from one provider to another. CommBank, they prefer their forms in a hard copy and it needs to be posted out. Thus, there is no email address provided here. Likes of Macquarie, there may be an email address provided where you use the email address, and that's when you sort of decide, okay, there's an email address available. I can save a soft copy, email the soft copy to the client, get them to sign it back. As far as it's a good scan, I can upload it in class and move on with the process. Where there's no email option available, I always suggest to print the form, save a copy on a desktop just in case, or save a copy in your preferred location, and send the form out to the client. Once the form is back, you can upload the form by using the upload button here. So I would just use this as an example with the sample, assuming that you've got a signed copy, and you hit upload. A little warning message always comes up reminding you what the process is. Because you've gone through the process already, you could move on. Once this form uploads, I will talk about the importance of little statuses in the second section of this page. Waiting on provider. So when you're setting up a bank account and you upload a form, or whenever you're setting up any feed which has an authority form linked to it, the status was changed to waiting on provider as soon as you upload the form. This is a good indicator for you that I've uploaded the form here today and I should be sending it out to the provider either by post or email, depending on the feed. And it comes into play, say, if you are setting up 10 feeds in a day, or you've got 4 different teams, depending on the size of the organization, and they're following their processes. It's very important to understand that this status should tie in when you've sent the form out. Say, and it comes in handy, say, after 10 business days, for some reason the feed has not activated. You would know it's been 11 days now when I posted the form out or I emailed the form out. A feed should activate within 10 days. And all this information is available in the user guide page. As a rule of thumb, if you're past the 10 days period, the status would give you an option to request a follow-up. It would say activation overdue. I would cover this in detail when we talk about managing our feeds later, but while I'm on this page, I thought I'll just quickly explain what this means. After the 10 days, you have the option to actually go into a fund and request a follow-up. Like I said, we'll come back to this soon. Once you get the form back, and in case it's not successful or it's been rejected by a provider, this is where the status appears for you and when the authority came back. Moving on, feed setup with an advisor, or also known as a third-party authorization. It's important to set up the advisor first whenever we go to a third-party setup process. Why is that? I'll show you in a second. So in this scenario, I would use a new broker or platform feed setup in comparison to a product already available in the fund. Because this is where you've identified that I have an Asgard statement here, part of the documentation. What should I be doing now? So you click on new broker and platform feed. Before I go ahead with this setup, we'll set up the advisor as a contact. So at the business level, you click on business or business contacts, or just click on contacts here. I have a contact person available. At the business level, you may have an administrator who's also an advisor to the business, or you may want to set up a new one. So you click on new person. In this case, I have one set up, so I'll just click on that individual. Important part is click on roles, and an advisor role should always be selected, because if it's not selected, you would not be able to access the authorities tab. Since I have the advisor, I can now go to the authorities. So this is a good example, and I've put in a Macquarie ESI CMT account for the same advisor, whereas now we're setting up an Asgard. So it's important to know how the authority process works from an advisor viewpoint. You can have an advisor which supports a Macquarie CMT account or the keys setup, an Asgard, a ComSec, or the list can go on. However, if the same advisor is linked to an authority twice, say an Asgard account 1, Asgard account 2, on different authorities, you would need to set up the advisor the second time. It's also for identifier purposes, because in the drop-down in the feeds console, which I'll be going back to in a second, it'll be easier for you to identify if you name them slightly differently. So once you go in here, you select, say, Asgard, which I've already done. The option becomes available, and you enter the advisor code here. At this stage, you may not have the advisor code handy, so you can move on. It doesn't stop you from a setup viewpoint. We'll go back to the fund. A little tip with setting up brokers or platforms or wraps, so they call it. It's a good idea to start typing with the product name, because you may not be sure, because the list is so wide in comparison to a bank account. It could be a white label to a product. It's a different name and class when you set it up versus what you see on a statement. You can always look at the footers in a statement to see where the data is coming from. If unsure, you can always contact support or go into the user guide, try to type in the name and see if it comes up. In this case, we're setting up an Asgard wrap. So Asgard E-wrap is the most popular product. So you put that in. Display name, again, very similar for consistency purposes. Call it, say, Asgard portfolio, or to the likes of what you would want to call it across your business. Account number is very important. This is what you would need to check on a statement. If you don't have a statement handy, this is where the value of help on this automated feed becomes available. So I would hit save so that this screen sort of recognizes the information I've put in, just in case I click in another information. A little warning would come up every time you hit save, depending on if information's missing on a feeds console page. In this case, it's sort of reminding us that you need to select an authority, which I'll cover in a second. So click on help on this automated feed, takes you to the page. And that talks about the importance of selecting a product while setting up a wrapper or a broker. The top part always talks about what the feed is, very general introduction, but with a wrapper or a broker, I always suggest going through these little exclamation marks on top, or what's supported in this feed, what do I need to be wary of, does it support history or not? These are things that would help you understand what do I need to do next once I've set up the feed, or what can I expect from a feed. The configuration process is where it would tell you the account number if unsure, and this is when you don't have one handy. And one of the main reasons why I've picked Asgard, it's got a unique account number format. It's got an underscore in it. You may not have one. It could be a simple number. So this is purely to let you know, if in case you have one, there's nothing wrong with it, yes, use it. Or the statement you have handy may have 5 different numbers on it, depending on how the advisor is reporting to you. Back to the screen, you put that code in, the account number in. The hint field is purely for record keeping purposes. You may or may not want to record it. If you have it handy, you can put it in. This will come in handy for the auditor if the auditor wants to go in and check something against a hint. With the wrapper or broker, it's sort of not valid. But like I said, if you have that information, it's always better to save it somewhere in the fund. Moving to the second half, which is the third-party authorization, also known as the advisor authority. Because we've set up the advisor, the option becomes available. Again, another indicator. If you haven't set up the advisor, you would not get anything here, and you can always go back to the business level, set up the contact, set up the role, and put in the authority, move on. Now, this stage, from a setup viewpoint in the fund, you've done everything. What does do not load data mean? This is a very common question we get from a lot of administrators. What does this date mean here? Does it mean that, if I've processed a fund to a certain date, should I use that? Well, it is a timing thing. When you set up a feed, you could be setting this up during the year. The advisors decided to, introduce a product to the trustees in a fund. So at that point, you can take a call. Where am I with my processing? Have I finished the half yearlies? For your mental peace, you can always put in that date here. Say, I want to start this data from the 1st of January of a financial year. Alternatively, you may not have processed that fund. And does it support history? You can check that in the user guide page and go, I'll leave it as it is, and let's see what the feed brings in. Will save me a lot of time from a processing viewpoint. Another important step when I scroll down is holding accounts. And this is where the importance of understanding a wrap and a broker comes into play. Asgard is a wrap, so it supports a bank account within the product. So it's a complete product. I have Asgard bank account set up here to show you what we need to do. So you select the bank within the screen and then the investments that are supported through the product. So many times you may not have the investment available because it's a new product. In that case, all you do is set up the bank account, link it to the product, and leave it. When the data flows through, it will automatically bring in the information for you. But this is a very important step when the fund is half year, through the year, 1st of January, a new product's introduced and these investments would be linked. If you don't have that information, it's advisable to link all the holding accounts to save you from the duplication. A lot of times administrators forget to link these investments, and when the feed starts, it would duplicate. Because we're in the world of automation, the feed thinks that this investment does not exist in a fund, so it would create it for you. So it's trying to make your life easier by creating that investment that I've identified these 5 investments through the data, and I should load it into a fund. When I say I is the automation process. Now, if you're aware of what the information is, tick it. If not, select all. Now, moving on with the advisor part, which I'd left before. At this stage, the setup in class is complete except the advisor code. At this stage, either you go back to the trustees going, I've identified an advisor as per the statements, or you may have a relationship with the advisor, or the advisor could be in-house depending on the setup of your organization. That stage, you contact the advisor. Prior to that, there's a user guide page that sort of guides you in a direction as to what an advisor code should look like. You can always go Control F and search the product you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for Asgard. And it tells you what sort of an advisor code, what the advisor code looks like. Ends with a BA01. Now, when you look at an Asgard statement, it is with hyphens in it. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, BA-01, 02, 5, 6. However, this page suggests how to set up that advisor code. Ignore the hyphens so that when the data flows through, it would load in the fund. Now, just a little explanation about how a feed works in terms of an advisor authority or an account holder authority. When we get data from a provider, if a setup is not complete in class, the two automated systems will not talk to each other. So we have rules in place that would say it's an advisor authority. I'm getting data for advisor BA01234. Is it set up in class? If it doesn't find it, that's where the importance of putting this advisor code in the contact is very important. Once you put that in, the advisor needs to follow the process. Back to the user guide page, the authority process. Now, with the advisor authorities, as I mentioned to you, you could have an online process, a form, or an email. So this is an online process where the advisor goes online. And we've put in a few screenshots to make it easier for the advisor. You can always forward this link to the advisor. Most cases, they are aware of the process. So they go online, log in with their details and go, okay, I've just got to follow these 4 steps. Make sure I've selected the right data to be sent across. There's always a lot of confusion about what do I set up? How do I do it? How's my data going to look like? I always suggest leave it on the advisor first. Let him or her do the setup, complete it. We wait a couple of days and see what we receive. Sometimes you may need an inception file. It's always a good idea to suggest to the advisor that if you get an option to request an inception file, please do it for us so that you get everything from the cost-based information on an investment, and it's easier for you to reconcile. Back in the fund, it's important to make sure if you want to put that do not load in data before date, if it's relevant at that stage or not. Sometimes when you set up the advisor in, you would need to change the status here. So when you go hit save, the status says authority not sent. However, you sent that email to the advisor. So you just change it to waiting on provider and hit save. Again, the importance or relevance of this is you can keep a tap on when did I send that email. Or, it's a checkpoint for you 5 days later. You can check your emails. Did I even send an email? An advisor authority process is quicker, even though we have the time frame to 10 days as a standard because that's what we get from most providers. However, with the advisor may act on it straight away. And normally it's within 48 hours the data becomes available. Before I go to the next slide, or the setup, which is management of feeds on a business level, I would go through the second question for the poll. You would see a little pop-up on your screen which talks about how much time do you spend managing feeds. It's important for us to understand how much time an administrator spends on feeds. Depending on the size of your organization, it's always recommended to view this frequently. Do you do it daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly? Some may say, I have a feed specialist within our team that manages it for us. Some don't look at it because the feeds are consistent products, and if something's working consistently, there's an assumption that it would work well for everything. So it could be very different. Please put in your options so we can get that feedback and an understanding on how you look at it. I'll leave it for another 10 seconds before I close the poll. Thank you very much. Now, moving on. Management of data feeds. What does that mean for your business? Again, it always comes down to the size of your business. From my viewpoint, I say if you have, say, 50 funds, it's always a good idea to look at your feed console on a regular basis, maybe every second day. Anything above 50 funds or 100 plus funds, it's advisable to look at it daily. Spending that 5 minutes on your feed console gives you a lot of satisfaction and clarity on where I am with my automation process. You may not be processing that fund daily, but if your feeds are working, at least you rest assured that the data is flowing through. So now I'm at the business level. So this is where you view all your funds. You click on feeds. There's also another way to get to it, feeds and feeds console. The shortcut is clicking on feeds. Now, these are different statuses as mentioned here. So you have a setup, a waiting, an error. What do these mean? I'll take you through each status. So what is waiting on verification? As it suggests, this is a status, and the main reason for me to put it here, it's only valid for Westpac at this stage because it's an online process. So when you set up a Westpac account, it's important to verify the account because there's no paper form available. Rejected on provider and unlinked accounts, I'll show you in a second. Waiting is another tab that confuses a lot of administrators. What does waiting on provider mean? Because once you put in that form, as I mentioned earlier, that status automatically updates. And waiting on provider is purely the provider to be acting on it. After 10 days, that changes to activation overdue if the feed's not activated. But if everything's done or the steps are followed correctly, it would move to an OK status. Waiting on authorizer. That's something you would have put in as an administrator or the feeds person in the team, setting up the feed saying, I'll put it on authorizer because I don't have information handy yet. I'll come to it later. And that's why this setup comes in very handy. Follow-up requested. So after the 10 days period when you've gone in activation overdue and you request a follow-up, this is where it's an indicator. How many days has it been that I've requested a follow-up? Error, I would go through that in detail. So back to our business console. So if I go into setup, this is a page that sort of talks about what needs to be set up, an identification process as to, can I even set them? Do I need to mark them as manually imported? Is there a feed available? Did I forget to set up a product? So the first one I would want to show you is unlinked holding accounts. The value of that, you may have a fund that does not have a wrapper or broker because of the size of the fund. This screen allows you to set up a field that talks about directly held investments. A lot of time we get this, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to spend 5 minutes on making it a directly held group? I know what this is. You would, but let's say you have another administrator in the team who may be helping you out on your fund on a day. Or one of the partners needs to go in a fund and quickly look at something. This is an indicator they would know, okay, it's a directly held group. I have a meeting with the client today. Should I suggest them that they should look at a wrap or a broker product? So These are little tips and tricks you need to keep in mind, and that's where feeds comes into play. Also, if I select all, mark them as directly held, the generate income functionality to be used or not comes in handy when you're in a fund. This is a separate topic, so but I'll quickly explain how that works. So if you have a fund where you have, say, like we used the example of Asgard earlier, and the feed is active, all the information flowing through the feed, or majority of the information flowing through the feed related to income, your buys and sells, your cash data flows through the feed. Whereas if you have directly held investments, you would know that I have to make sure my trades are captured through the bank account. That may be set up separately. Is my income data flowing through? Do I need to generate income on that? Like I said, that's a totally different process in terms of how to process a fund. However, it ties in the data feeds process, because if it's not available for a fund, it's an indicator for you that I've got to do this work. I've got to make sure that I've processed all the buys and sells before I hit generate income. And the relevance of that is when it's directly held and your trades are up to date, your unit holdings are up to date, when you hit generate income, it factors in the total number of units held versus the income data available through the feed on a class community level, and it generates the income. Moving on with the setup. So once you've cleaned up the setup side of things in terms of an unlinked holding account, it would be a more realistic number. So, if I have a Macquarie account, or I have, say, these are my setup list, I shouldn't be having any unlinked accounts. Either it should be linked, or it should have a product to it, or a directly held status to it. Authority not sent, as mentioned to you, this is a good indicator. You may have set up a fund, put in the details in there, and forgotten to upload the form. So this is a good checkpoint for you. So you can click on it by going in here. Check your records. Do I have a signed form? Yes, I do. Upload it. And this is a very important step when you set up a bank account. If you don't upload a form to class, and even though the data is available behind the scenes, because it's an automated process, the data would not load in the fund. And this is where it is very important to follow the steps using the user guide. And as a rule of thumb, you generate a form, the steps are, you generate a form, send it to the trustees, they sign it, send it back to you. Depending on, do you email them, do you post them, you can always take a call based on your processes and the size of the organization. When the form comes back, always upload the form. Make sure that it's scanned clearly, just in case, It's important. Then you email the form out and keep an eye on it. So once you've uploaded the form here, depending on the timing of when you uploaded the form, or have I forgotten about it, give it a day. Normally, these feeds work on an overnight basis. So if a feed has to become active or data has to become available, it's an overnight process. So say you forgot to upload this form and you realize that I've forgotten it, nothing to worry, you upload the form and wait overnight. If the feed does not flow through, and it's been 25 days that I had requested this from the trustees and I'd sent this out, and you're certain, you can always request a follow-up or send an email to the feeds team saying, this is what's happened, I've requested it, are you able to double check, or what's happening? And we have the option to go through the process of checking the files and getting back to you what could be the best option available. Alternatively, you can resend the form back, if you're not sure. Waiting on verification, I touched that earlier. I'll quickly show you what that means. Westpac is the unique example for this process. When you scroll down, it talks about an online authority type. What does that mean? It cuts through the paper authority form process. So all you do is set this up in class. When you set it up, you get an authority activation number. This is a very useful number because it's unique to your bank account. You keep a note of this number, send an email to, or you click on the help on this automated feed here, that takes you to the page that talks about what needs to be done. You send an email to the trustees saying, we've set this up and we try to get a feed for your bank account. Are you able to follow these 5 steps? Log into your net banking, online banking, put in this activation number, and it's a fair more quicker process. Now, a lot of times we get accountants and administrators saying to us that, the trustees are older, with all due respect to the age. They don't want to do this. They don't like setting up online authorities. What do we do? Or they're not tech savvy. My recommendation, get them to call the customer service. They can call up the bank, and generally, in my experience, whenever I've suggested this option's worked. If they don't want to do this at all, it could be a manual process. However, you can always say, give us a CSV file, and it's a quicker way of doing things. Moving on. The waiting tab. Waiting on provider, like I said, it says up to date because we've set these 2 up today. You go in there tomorrow, it'll be 1 day. After 10 days, or hopefully within 10 days, this gets activated and the status will change to okay, and it will move to the working tab. Waiting on authorizer, it's a checkpoint for you that I need to go back in. 2 days ago, I put in the information, but I didn't have it. I didn't have a statement handy. Now I have one, just to be sure. I need to go in and I'll check the process, the setup. What have I done here? Go in and move on. Now, manual. This is an interesting field. A lot of times you may have accidentally selected manually imported when you were setting up a feed, or you didn't even pay attention to it because you were setting up the bank account at that point, or you were setting up a product and you wanted to get things done. You've done it manually and moved on because you couldn't wait for the feed process. For a client meeting, say, for example. Now, at this stage, you can always go back and say, yes, I have a concept of product that's information I've entered myself, or if you're a new client, the transition teams put it in for you based on information you would have given us. You go in, fill in all the details, and change it to use automated feed. At this stage, we are back to the screen where we were earlier, and you complete the setup process, follow the guidelines as per the user guide, and move on. Alternatively, you also have other manual feeds in there, or manual accounts in there, which you would not be getting a feed for. So you've marked them as manually imported. The importance of directly hidden investments comes into play here, because it's now moved to manually imported, and these are the accounts. I may refer them to a senior in the team or to the partner for the next client meeting to be able to advise that, depending on the size of your fund, do you want to look at this as an option? Do you want to have a wrap or a broker in for better management? Because having a directly held investment in a fund means a lot of extra processing for you, because you've got to keep a tab on individual buys and sell confirmations and income statements from the client. Working. This is a screen we always love because it's nice and green. That's an indicator that things are working for you. It's all good and you can move on. The higher the number here, the healthier your feed console is. There are days when you would come in and the errors have gone up by a big number. I always say, whenever you see an error, try to investigate what's happening. There could be corporate actions that has thrown your investments out of balance. There could be data late by a day. So always give it a day before you think, it's time to raise a ticket with the support team. You can always click on these 3 little dots and go into the fund and identify what those issues are. And the other option is by clicking onto that feed itself. Maybe the feed has stopped for some reason. You can always check that by the last process date, depending on when you've gone into that console. It might say a date which is 3 weeks old. So that's an identifier for you. Why has my feed stopped? Now, at that stage, if a feed is not active for 20 days, that's our indicator when the status goes to feed no longer active. At that point, a lot of times we get inquiries about my feed is no longer active, please reactivate it. This is where the importance of understanding what's happening with the product or with the provider is important. So at that stage, instead of sending the request, try to get a latest statement. See, is it really an active account? Has the product changed? Or, the account information may have changed. The advisor or the trustees may have changed a name. They might have updated their corporate trustee. And it's all very secure data. And when the two don't talk to each other because it's all automated, the feed may stop. So this makes it easier for us to help you out as well. Imagine raising a ticket with my feed has stopped versus my feed has stopped and here's a recent statement and I know this is active. That makes it very easy for the feeds consultant, or to say the support team, to go, yes, now I'll follow it up with a provider and say, this is a statement, the account is active, why is it stopped? It definitely fast tracks the whole process. And that's the whole idea of understanding these different statuses. That's the whole idea of managing your feeds at the business level. Okay. How to get help. Now, we've gone through it when I was showing you the setup process, the help on this automated feed. You have a fairly detailed user guide where you type in the name of the provider or the institution you're trying to work on. It's very important to always keep a check on the user guide. When you're looking at, we may have updated it based on some information provided to us from the provider. They might have changed the process. Normally, if it's a big change, it goes through the release notes, and we make sure we would let our clients know about any major changes in any sort of authority. If a new authority is added or a new functionality is added to a feed, it would be through your release notes. And that sort of puts a lot of weight on keeping an eye on the release notes when they are available on a monthly basis. Now, follow-up process. It's very important to understand the follow-up process for an account holder follow-up versus a third-party follow-up. Even though the screen gives you the option to request a follow-up in terms of when your activation overdue, that's the most common used follow-up. But if it's activation overdue, did I even send the form to the provider? Is the first question you should ask yourself. If you have, yes, click on that follow-up, and it's an automated process, goes to the provider. Now, the difference between a follow-up for a third party. A lot of times you would have the setup like I did show you earlier in class, but you've forgotten to put the advisor code, or you haven't checked the advisor code format, or is the advisor code correct? That's something you need to check. Once you've made sure all these details are correct, for a third party, it's always a good idea to send a quick note to the advisor saying, did you complete the process on your end? That saves a lot of time for us and you in terms of following up. Say the advisor goes, yes, I did. I've done everything on my end. It looks good. I can see screens that says it's active. At that point, you can send that note to us. It's very similar to, just doing sending that extra email saves, saves us from the back and forth of emails. It's less frustration from a viewpoint of why is it not working? As much as we want to help you out, but if there's an advisor in place, the advisor has a lot of control. So it's important we understand that. Now, these are some useful user guide pages I've put in here. The copy of this would be available for you. And you can always go into details of these pages and understand what that is. The most important one is the data feed status page. That's a page that talks about if a feed is not working. We have a team that regularly monitors any issues with the feed. First thing they come in the morning, they would look at, is everything loading the way it should be? Is it as expected? If not, we sort of put an update there. Alternatively, you may find something in your fund or across your console saying, "Oh, my query feeds are stopped 4 days ago. What's happening here?" Could be a possibility. Did class not identify it? You can notify us and we will look at it and update you. That's where the value of data feed status page comes into play. And it talks about a lot of provider issues, if there are any. If there are any changes to the data type, or are we updating something? Because it's a lot of automation we go through from the provider versus how do we load the files. We may get a raw file, which we have to format in a way that it talks to our system. So a little comma in their process, in their file format, changes the whole story for us. And you may find it before us. You may get into the system early morning and identify something that doesn't seem right. Please raise a ticket, and we'd always be happy to assist. Now that brings me to the end of this webinar. I can see there are a few questions asked. I will try to answer the most frequently asked questions. Having said that, answers will be provided to all the questions asked here later. Now, the first one I'm looking at here is, why do my feeds keep stopping? As mentioned to you earlier, it could be various reasons, and we should be treating each feed as a separate product, even though it's the same provider. What that means is you could have a Westpac account where the setup has changed versus a Westpac account which is no more valid. So it's important that we look at it individually. Why does it stop on a regular basis? There could be a lot of reasons for it. So to give you one example, say you have a bank account where we stopped receiving data for a reason. It's an issue at a provider end. We are not aware of it yet. You've identified it. You raise a ticket. We would identify it in a way that when did we last receive the data versus is the account active? So from your viewpoint, when a feed stops, you should always try to get a latest statement and see what's happening there. I'll give more examples when I provide the answers later, because it's a case-by-case scenario. So if you have a more specific question, feel free to put that through. Moving on. Do I need an authority for all bank accounts from the same provider? Or how do I set up these bank accounts? Now, the important part there is to identify, what do I have in a fund? Is it a wrap? Is it a broker? Or do I have 4 bank accounts that are separately set up? So you could have a fund with a Macquarie Bank. You could have 3 other bank accounts in there and a wrap. So the first identifier is look at a statement. Sometimes that can be confusing too. A statement may be reporting a bank account, which is held outside because it's a complete product. So you may want to understand that first. However, there are certain providers that also support multiple bank accounts. So without going into too much detail, I would show you the page that gives you that information. So if you go into the data feeds overview page and scroll down and you click on banks, this is where you can find the information. Also, if you click on stockbroking, it talks about when do we get the data, what is supported through it, and in this stage, since we're talking about multiple accounts, I'll click on our platform and wraps, and if I go down, it says it's a fairly detailed list, so I'm just trying to find the right one. So Premium is a good example. It supports multiple cash accounts. So this is where you can have a look at, so see how it says the feed supports multiple cash holdings and how to link those. There's another page available for you. So it's a matter of understanding the product better. And when in doubt, you're always more than welcome to raise a ticket with us and say, this is a statement, please advise. Having a statement in your initial query always fast tracks the process for us to understand too. Next question. How do I know a wrap supports a bank account? Like I said earlier, I'm getting a lot of questions around this So I'll quickly talk about what this means. So when you look at a statement, you may have a bank account linked in it that talks about this is the bank account, with the transactions. Another checkpoint is try to look for a transaction report. Does it give you a transaction history? Does it give you a trades information? That's a good checkpoint that it is supported through the feed. Because if it's just a bank account, it may just be a balance on top. So on the first page, it's like an overview of the portfolio saying Macquarie bank account with $100,000 in it versus a Macquarie bank account with transaction history on page 3 and 4 and 5. So that's how you identify it. I have a few questions here, very specific, so I wouldn't take much of your time. We'll be answering these questions later. Please fill in the survey in the end for feedback purposes. And if you have any further questions, I would leave this on for a few more minutes for you to ask that, and I'll get back to you with the answers. Thank you for your time today. We'll just wait for 5 minutes. If you have any questions specific to your business, to a broker, wrap, feel free to ask them. So we've captured them all. I'll be quiet for the next 5 minutes. Myself and you, please put those through, and I'll answer them in detail specifically. Thank you once again for your time. Hope you have a good day.